that there are green areas in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa, areas where primary productivity has been increasing. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some important successes that have occurred in that region that give us both inspiration and technical models for how we can, in fact, make these kind of changes in a positive way in other parts of the continent. Indeed, if you were in southern Niger back in the 1980s, you would have seen a landscape that had been absolutely stripped of trees, where most of the livestock had died, food production was destroyed due to a series of long-term droughts that amounted to about 15 years in length. This was a situation in which farmers were suffering very greatly, and it was a major reason why the United Nations installed the UN Convention on Combating Desertification, to attack this enormous problem of desertification near the Sahara Desert. But if you go back to Niger today, and I've been back there with many colleagues to introduce them to what has happened, you would find that over 1.2 million households in south-central Niger, huge region covering 5 million hectares, have restored their lands, their grazing lands and their farmlands, through the process of farmer-managed natural regeneration. We call it a renaissance because, in fact, it is the biggest positive environmental transformation that Africa has ever seen. If you fly over the region in an airplane, you look down and you will see what looks like a dryland forest. But that's not a forest, it's all cropland interspersed with villages where farmers and their families have used their own initiative without cash subsidies, without inputs, to actually regenerate a vast agroforest environment in which they're planting their crops in the shade of the trees that they have regenerated on their land. Densities of anywhere from 50 to 150 trees per hectare have been achieved through farmer-managed natural regeneration, which is basically identifying the rootstocks and the wildlings that come up in the fields that are useful trees, such as Phyherbia albida, which is the dominant one in this picture, and then using those trees to restore their land and their crop fertility. Indeed, Phyherbia albida, or as we used to know it, Acacia albida, is a truly unique agroforestry species because of its ability to be dormant during the crop growing season, wherein it drops tons of green biomass with high nitrogen from nitrogen fixation and stimulates crop growth and crop yield. This is what we call the Albedo Effect, reducing high temperatures and radiation, protecting the crops, and providing higher soil fertility and lots of fodder for livestock during the dry season. And so here we have a summary of what has actually happened in Niger over a vast area of 5 million hectares. 200 million trees reestablished, additional 500,000 tons of grain produced per year, reduction in the drought impacts and the greater resilience of the farming systems, which we've noted in successive droughts, where farmers are still able to raise decent crop yields, where farms without trees have total catastrophe. And of course, major sequestration of carbon in the soils and above ground timber that's produced. Well, this model has been noticed, and from the area where we have mapped this success, we now see green spots all across the Sahel where farmlands and community grazing lands are now being regenerated through farmer-managed natural regeneration on the farmlands and assisted natural regeneration in the grazing lands, the community grazing lands and degraded forest lands. There are now dozens of projects